again. Risa here from Core Integrity with Soul Science. Let's talk about the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and science. So it's helpful to contextualize the fifth ray relative to our explorations with the fourth ray, where in the fourth ray you have these battles and conflicts of opposites and the potential for the death and rebirth of the personality, the evolution of consciousness through the moving between these oppositional forces. When we go through one of those death, rebirth, resurrective processes that we can on that fourth ray cycle of unconsciousness to consciousness, we gain that which is insightful. We gain more awareness. We gain a closer sense of accuracy in terms of what we truly are as human beings, and beyond being a human being. So this is why the fifth ray has this concrete aspect, because it is that knowledge which isn't just wisdom in terms of a greater spiritual principle or a sensing into the deeper truth about reality. And of course, the love of truth is a second ray love wisdom trait, but it is much more about the specification and that refinement of one's knowledge so that it becomes concrete. We really know with a capital K. It is true insight. So it is through those death and rebirth processes often that we gain that true spiritual insight. However, of course, the fifth ray doesn't simply just correspond to true spiritual wisdom or insight and knowledge as well, because just as all the other rays have, we have a positive and a negative, or a mature and an immature expression as well. So the fifth ray is a combination of rays 1 and 3 of our 3 major rays of aspect. So similar to the third ray, we do have a lot to do with mental processes with the fifth ray. It's very mental, but it is different from the third ray in that the third has a more abstract or creative element, which leads one to, let's say, be a philosopher on the third ray. Whereas a fifth ray type of person won't so much be interested in philosophy because it is too much of an abstraction for a fifth ray type of person. The fifth ray wants to say, okay, yeah, cool, you've got this metaphysical principle up here, but how is that made real? What does that actually look like when we test it vigorously through the scientific method, trial and error, putting it into practice and getting concrete data? So even though there's this relationship, a very obvious relationship between rays 3 and 5, a strong third ray temperament and a strong fifth ray temperament, if they're expressing in an immature way, will probably butt heads because the third ray will have too much of that what if and playing with thoughts in this abstract way, whereas the concrete fifth ray person will want to get to the bottom and get to the core. So exploring it a bit more deeply, esoterically, when we take this first ray quality, it gives the third ray aspect of mind much more of a penetrative and focused quality, which is what drives the fifth ray into that obsession even with material substance and matter. So this is what creates the scientist. Of course, what does a scientist do? Let's say they are a biologist. They are scrutinizing really deeply the qualities inherent in matter. You put things under the microscope. So much more discrimination, discernment, and picking at the details. So whereas the third ray, one of the shadows of the third ray that we considered was being a bit too intellectually vague and wafting off into mental abstraction without it being grounded in a practical approach. The fifth ray can have that oppositional effect where there can be too much in the nitpickiness of things, too much into matter. But when the fifth ray expresses in a mature way, we really see the insight quality of the fifth ray, which is really the leading to genuine metaphysical understanding and knowledge, not just wise principles or abstract philosophical ponderings, but true spiritual knowledge. When we consider fifth ray types of people, and mature fifth ray types of people, we could consider Albert Einstein or Nikola Tesla. I don't know too much about Nikola Tesla, but he had that famous quote, which is something like, the future of science will be found by anyone who looks at frequency, energy, vibration. So what we see with the fifth ray is this scrutiny, which should, when esoterically oriented, reveal the deeper relationship between spirit and matter, rather than one of these vices, which is too much of that materiality. So, of course, Nikola Tesla and his discoveries are really at the foundation of our modern society in terms of radio waves and wireless technology. And of course, that is a kind of technology which reveals the reality of frequency and energy, does it not? Because these frequencies are transmitted across space without necessarily, of course, you have your wireless device, right? But it's not transferring through a wire to get from A to B. It's just transferring through that electrical energetic current. So he was a very good example of a fifth ray type of individual with that higher insight. So it's an interesting thing in that way, whereas the shadow of the fifth ray will get rid of or excuse or bypass spiritual realities in favour of a kind of reductionist, materialistic worldview. Whereas the mature fifth ray is exactly that kind of scientific testing, and the precise dedication with the first and the third rays combined, it gives it that penetrative quality, penetrates so deeply into matter that we begin to discover the true esoteric roots of all substances, which is all about spirit and energy and how that relates to the form. So in that way, the mature fifth ray has so much to do with self-awareness and the divinizing of form, and just the discovery of those processes which allow for a refinement of the form and the revealing of the divinity within form. So it's a great ray. And again, it is the ray of the kingdom of the soul. So it is that which humanity is trying to evolve towards through the unconscious dualism of the fourth ray, of the battling between the opposites of the higher and the lower selves, until there is this alchemical synthesis, and alchemy is a word that belongs to the fifth ray, whereby we discover, oh, this is what I truly am, or this is the real relationship. And so as much as there is this obvious affinity with the third ray, in that it's a ray of precise mental awareness, and that it's a relationship with the first ray, and that it is a combination of first 1 and 3 for that penetrative quality. There is also inherent in the mature fifth ray a relationship with the second ray, because the second ray is that of love and wisdom. So on the second ray we see a lot of the teacher or the illuminator, the person who dispenses that greater awareness. So when the fifth ray person has that deliberate accuracy and they pair it with a second ray orientation, which connects one to the deeper spiritual truth. Again, love of truth is an aspect of the second ray, but we bring that kind of accuracy and precision with the fifth ray, which allows the spiritual wisdom and the spiritual intelligence to be permeated into form and material substance, and made real through its deep connecting in with form. And we see again that hence the word alchemy being connected to the fifth ray. Okay? So we've already touched on some of the positive and negative qualities, but let's recap and focus on the virtues and vices. So virtues: precision of thinking, perseverance, focus, accuracy in detail, and of course the potential for insight and understanding the relationship between form and energy. And the fifth ray people moving into the future will be those kinds of people who will use concrete scientific processes to reflect and prove esoteric realities. And we already see that. Of course, I used Nikola Tesla as an example, but there's also people like Rupert Sheldrake, who is probably a fifth ray personality. He started off in science. I think he did a lot of biology, but then he started to apply the scientific process of discovery through in relation to metaphysical subject matters, such as the sense of being stared at. And he got very consistent and repeatable data. And of course, the hyper-rationalist scientists were very cranky about that, but even when people tried to repeat the study, they got the similar results. So once again, that's a good example of a fifth ray person who is utilizing that quality and precision of the scientific method to point to these more subtler realities, the deeper truths behind what is substance and what is the nature of energy and what is therefore the nature of consciousness. Because if we can sense being stared at, what does that infer about consciousness? It certainly seems to point to the fact that consciousness doesn't simply end where our physical body ends. So with that, of course, that oppositional aspect with one of the vices is that the fifth ray person can be materialistic and reductionist, and that comes from that narrow-mindedness through that penetrative focus of the fifth ray and that hyper-accuracy, which then reduces things to pure fact. There can be an attitude with this sort of rationalist, reductive intellectualism that is very much on the lines of the why must always succumb to the how. We can see that there's been a necessary evolution into science and technology as the most exoteric expression of the fifth ray, in terms of evolving out of a kind of immature evangelical religious mindset, as well as the primitive psychic mindset where it was really believed that the tribal people would be doing their ritual and that would make the sun god rise every day, and they had to do it every day or the sun wouldn't rise. Now, of course, we know that that's not actually true, but a shadowed fifth ray person might make a mockery of that sort of process, whereas a fourth ray individual will go, okay, well, we know that that's not technically true, but what does that delineation of meaning that we see in so many primitive societies, what does this tell us about the human psyche, and what are these deeper patterns of meaning? So the shadow of the fifth ray will kind of push everything aside, and anything that could potentially be construed as mystical or mythical or anything outside the bounds of a rationalistic, factual point of view is irrational and therefore useless and untrue. And we see that with people like Richard Dawkins, for instance, who of course is very successful in his line of work, and he's a very clever person, obviously got a very well-developed intellect, but his attitude is very much the most obvious expression of a person, of a narrow-minded fifth ray person. He can't conceive of anything outside of the bounds of his reductionalist rationalism. And one of the weird ironies of that is if you're stuck in that, you can be very blind to your own emotional complexes. For someone who's so intellectual, I've seen Richard Dawkins make, for instance, he criticised astrology once, but he didn't actually criticise astrology. He deliberately picked and chose bits of astrology that he kind of threw together and went, see, this is astrology. These people read these magazine horoscopes and they believe it. But anyone who actually studies astrology for more than 20 minutes knows that making a judgment about astrology based on people reading magazine horoscopes is insane. It's like making a judgment about food based on eating one bite of an uncooked carrot. It's a straw man, basically. So there's this irony there where, of course, on the one hand, someone like Dawkins is very precise with his thinking, but then because he's so blind to his own biases, he can actually become very intellectually dishonest and harshly critical and end up utilizing the mind in a way where you believe you're being very factual, but you're not seeing the deeper truth about your own shadows, about your own biases, and how you might be manipulating your mind to extract certain information so that you can propagate your own deluded beliefs about reality. And I think there's a bit of a seed in that as to why so many hyper-rationalist scientific types, shadowed fifth ray people, have an obsessive critical attitude towards a medieval religious fanatics, because what I see is that there's often a bit of a mirroring aspect, whereas you can make science, rationalistic, reductionist science, a dogmatic belief system. And Rupert Sheldrake again wrote a book called The Science Delusion, which was kind of a response to Dawkins' The God Delusion, right? Where he spoke about science as a field of belief system that prevents real scientific inquiry. Here we go, we've got the deeper or the more mature fifth ray of being open to using scientific process to investigate metaphysical material. So the potential for the fifth ray once again is that the use of science to prove and connect to esoteric phenomenon. So yes, I've kind of gone off in different directions here rather than focusing on the biases, but that's basically a really good essential analysis of the great shadow of the fifth ray. Harsh criticism, rationalism, deluded self-concept in attributing too much value to intellect, when intellect is polarized and not fused with other components. So there's that shadow of the potential selfishness as well in that fifth ray quality, where we might start using, and we already see a lot of this now, the utilization of scientific technology for selfish purposes. And that's what happens when you take the fifth ray and it's not properly combined with the second ray, let's say, with love, with deeper wisdom and the love of truth and the love of humanity, where it can be technology can be utilized for very selfish ends, or intellect likewise can be used for personal gain. So, what else to say before we go into the planets and signs? Oh yes, the fifth ray corresponds to the Ajna center. Okay, the third eye. Once again, insight. But the opening of the third eye is really about the awakening to that vehicle of perception which sees divine light that precedes matter and that is inherently connected to matter. I call it the bullseye for a reason, right? To hit the bullseye. And so the development of the Ajna tends to happen quite a little bit later down the track for a person. But when we've got that open, energetic third eye, we can look at an object and see light that's permeating through. There's no longer a separation between the material form and the deeper spiritual essence, the energetic essence. So I did actually have a temporal opening of the Ajna once. There's still, the soul is working with the brain and still rewiring it, and it's still in a very somewhat of an earlier phase of that process for myself. But there was, in the beginning, this is several years ago now, where there was this temporal blasting open of that center. And at the time I was driving, and we had just had a thunderstorm and the sun had come out. And there was a rainbow in the sky, a really beautiful rainbow. And I looked at the rainbow, and it was like I was seeing colour for the first time, like I had been blind. And it was so shocking and beautiful that I burst into tears and just cried. So what was really going on there was that temporal shift into that pure awareness that comes with the Ajna, of that seeing. It was like the colours were imbued with a kind of substance, the spiritual substance, which is exactly that which I was saying before. in a way where there was this radiance coming out of the form. So this is a lot to do with the Ajna, and then through development of that center, it's very much the building of the mind so that one is no longer stuck in the concrete lower mind, which is what we see with those lower fifth ray types of people. And also most people, anyone who's not awakened to the soul will be stuck to some degree in the concrete lower materialistic mind, which is why people can be stuck in belief systems and things like this too, right? And there is that, I lost the sentence, got away from me. Oh yes, and breaking out of identification with the concrete mind, having the deeper mind, the deeper perception, the insight, the true spiritual insight, and then the blending of those two. So once again, the alchemy, blending the more subtle substance with the form. Right, so let's consider the planets and the signs. Only one planet to the fifth ray. The sacred planet, which belongs to the fifth ray, is Venus. Venus, the planet rather of relationship. But we've already sort of touched on this as to why it would be about relationship and why relationship would be connected to the fifth ray through the alchemy example, because we're taking two and we're blending them together, fusing them and creating the purified substance. And this is the true esoteric meaning of Venus. And of course that can play out as relationships between two people, but bringing two people together in a romantic, intimate setting is also an alchemical process, right? It's fusing, it's bringing two elements that are oppositional, and so going through a kind of fourth ray process and then revealing the divinized actualization when we bring those forces together. So this is why Venus is the ruler of the fifth ray, and Venus is the ruler of true insight. It is said that in the emergence of humanity as a kingdom, because of course we have the missing link, like there's no real answer as to where human beings came from. The ageless wisdom tells us that it was really through the impulse of the Venusian beings that the spark of mind was embedded into the earth kingdom, and so spawned mankind, human beings. And of course what differentiates humans from the animal kingdom is self-consciousness, is awareness. We have to develop it, we have to work at it, because again we have that concrete mind and we're part animal, and we have this perception that needs to be evolved and worked through. But it is that higher mind, the potential for gaining true insight and perception. And so that's Venus. And Venus esoterically rules Gemini, which is the sign of relationship, the wisdom of all relationship. This is quite a strong placement for me because I've got Venus in Gemini and it's my ascendant. So this brings a strong fifth ray quality into this particular expression, this lifetime, and the development of that faculty. And so the immature Venus in Gemini will express as something like the battles between sort of being horizontally split with relationships. And this certainly showed up when in my younger years, where that would play out with romantic relationship, but I'd kind of go from this person to this person and getting different flavors of things from people. So it's like these conflicts of opposites, whereas when the soul came in and started to really bring things together, and then we're talking about the resolution of those dualities. Again, alchemical fusion, which becomes a very meticulous and scientific process, because you can't just bring two things together and then all of a sudden we're one. No, to bring any two elements together is a very precise process, and you need to understand exactly what the quality of this substance is and exactly what the quality of this substance is and what happens when we bring them together. And that's a very scientific attitude. And in Gemini we have that Mercury ruling at the exoteric level, which is the pair of opposites, this and that, Mercury, the fourth ray, and then the Venus takes those and blends them and reveals the true relationship inherent in those oppositional forces inside. So Venus, planet of relationship, planet of science, planet of true insight. And of course she rules Taurus and Libra exoterically, and so Taurus has that quality of the precision of form, that's that artistry in Taurus. It's a fourth ray sign, so we get that fourth and the fifth ray combination there. It's not surprising actually to find some significant Taurian and Venusian alignments in the charts of scientists, for instance. the harmonization of form, the right relationship to form, how to bring things together. And in Libra, in terms of also that relational aspect of how do we mediate, but not exactly mediation in a fourth ray manner, but what is the right balance between these elements here. Libra is about my relationship to work, my relationship to and of course Libra rules the legal system as well. So trying to find that point of truth. A legal process, right, has, you've got this side and you're trying to get the insight as to what's true. And in the best of circumstances, then we actually get the truth in a legal process. But even there, you can see the subtle inference of the insight and actual truth, precise truth gained through that alchemical process of the opposites. And at this time, yes, we do not know, there is not currently a non-sacred planet ruling the fifth ray. So we shall see if that will change in time. So the signs. Leo, Sagittarius, Aquarius. Aquarius only has the fifth ray to express through it. And of course, we've been moving into an Aquarian age, and what has been really dynamically evolutionary about the current period that we're in as human beings is the technological development, for better and for worse. So we can see the virtue and vice of some of that fifth ray quality, where in the best sense, Aquarius, that fifth ray quality of Aquarius brings a revolutionary spirit. We see that with the Uranus ruling it at the exoteric level, and the development of technologies which can help bring about the spreading of true insight and wisdom, and to help our fellow brothers and sisters. And that points to the Jupiterian influence of Aquarius, and Jupiter is the esoteric ruler of Aquarius, which is a second ray planet. So we see the relationship between the fifth ray, the concrete awareness, and the deeper love principle there. But we can also see the shadow coming through the Aquarian age, the potential for the technocratic matrix and the convenience of modern technology at the expense of human health. Is it a good thing to have really intense 5G towers all around human beings, beaming very intense electrical energy through them? Is it good to be have the presence of the big brother state with all of its technological observation? So we're going to see the two forces here. What is technology going to be utilized for? And we can look in our own lives. How are we utilizing technology for our own development or hindrance? So that's Aquarius. In Leo, it's very much about the science of self-awareness. Immature Leo, as we've explored with our first ray video, can be all about me, but the mature Leo and that fifth ray quality that comes through Leo is that exactitude of what exactly I am. And there's the insight of the fifth ray, the true solar self, and the blending of mind, of the higher mind that comes through the fifth ray, the esoteric fifth ray, and permeating that through the creative activity. And of course, Leo is considered a very creative sign, right? Not surprising to see artists and actors with strong Leo placements. But that translates to that imbuing of, again, the higher mind with substance, and to create that solarized individual. And so that the fifth ray through Leo has a lot to do with the discovery of individuality through the awakening of true mind, true insight and awareness, and how do I individuate as a consequence of that. So that's the fifth ray through Leo, and also why it's not, I've known some esoteric people with strong Leo placements as well. And it elevates from that egocentricity to that awareness of self, and how to truly individuate and individualize as the solar self, which requires mental precision and awareness. And in Sagittarius, it's a matter of the overcoming of those fourth ray challenges that we explored in the last video, and developing that precision of activity. Of, okay, now I've worked out the difference between my lower mind activities and what my higher mind and my deeper self is wanting to do. And now I can more precisely focus, it's the first and third rays in the fifth, and make my activity, it's a mutable fire sign, my action aligned and precise relative to that goal. And this is what creates, moves Sagittarius from kind of being here with that mutability to becoming the one-pointed disciple. And that's finalized with its sixth ray energy, which we'll look at in the next video. So I think that is a good introduction to the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and science. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon.